Hey guys, it's TheFrXion here at TigerTank12. I'm gonna call me, I don't really care. Welcome back to World of Tanks, where we are today reviewing the VK30.02M. This is the predecessor to the legendary Panther tank, and it's situated at tier 6 in the German tech tree. And it has a very nice position. And I'm first gonna tell you why I chose this tank and what the plan is for the future. So we're going to be reviewing this tank today, and afterwards we're going to be reviewing the Leopard 1 line. That is because currently it is on sale because of the event that is going on, where they always choose one line that will be discounted and where you can buy them for less credits. And I own all of the tanks, as you can see right here. Also, because you have two options when you have the VK30.02M in your garage. This tank allows you to either pick the E50M line or the Leopard 1 line, and it's the only tier 6 medium tank which leads to two tech tree lines with only medium tanks. There are other tier 6 vehicles that lead to two tech tree lines, but none of them are only medium tanks. Most of them are mediums and heavies, like the Italians, like the Chinese ones, and also the Czechoslovakian ones, as you can see there. So it's very interesting because it's going to be a medium tank only line that you can get when you go through the VK. So let's first take a look at the VK. We're going to take a look at its stock portfolio and see what it's like in a stock configuration. I'm going to tell you guys my experiences. Now keep in mind, all of the things I tell you are my experiences. My review is probably not going to entail everything, so I don't claim to show off everything. I just want to show off what I think of the vehicle and what my perspective is on the tank. So it's my opinion in the end that you will kind of receive in this review. This is the VK when it's fully stock, and the tank itself in fully stock is actually not too bad. It's not one of the worst stock tanks there is. It lacks the pen because it's the old 75mm gun that you have. That is a tier 5 gun, and this gun doesn't have the best stats, doesn't have the best gun dispersion. The aim time is okay, the rate of fire is fairly good, but you do not have good penetration. And when you're playing this first, the bloom is going to be quite horrendous. You can see my crew is not very skilled because I really paid attention to not take a crew that's completely maxed out. So I've played with these guys, I trained them. The only one who I've trained more is the commander, because I need the sixth sense. Sixth sense is very important whenever you play tanks. So firepower is not the best, but it's okay. Survivability doesn't change a lot. The turret has 20mm more armor when it's fully upgraded, but that's not a big change in my opinion. And mobility wise, the only thing you'll be lacking here is the specific power to weight ratio. The top speed is still the same. This tank really accelerates decently, and it has a good top speed. It's very fast for a tier 6 medium tank of this stature. It doesn't have the best spotting. Even with the fully upgraded turret, it doesn't boast very good view range. So what would I do when I first get this tank completely stock? Now I would first go for the gun, because you can mount that without having to have the second tracks. And then I would also go for the second engine. That would be the Maybach HL210 instead of the 230. But because I haven't bought that, I'm just going to put the P30 in there. You'll get an additional 70 horsepower, which will assist you quite a bit. And then you go for the tracks. Obviously, you should have the one radio already unlocked, because if you play the VK, you can unlock all of these radios. So definitely get the VK 12 or the VK 7, because you only have 310 meters signal range on the VK 5. And then in the end, I would go with the turret, because the turret gives you an additional 20mm of protection at the front, but it actually has a very nice armor profile, and that is because the gun mantlet on this vehicle is quite thick. The gun mantlet on this vehicle is all up to 200mm thick, and it's quite large, so you'll actually bounce a few shots whenever somebody shoots your gun mantlet. So that's quite interesting. That was the stock configuration. Now, once you're fully upgraded, we can take a look at the firepower. You can see I already have some equipment on here. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Now, with this gun, you have 150 millimeters of penetration. Your rate of fire is quite decent. You have decent dispersion. You have decent aim time. As you can see right here, you have 8 degrees of gun depression, which is really nice. The only thing that you're lacking is the gun traverse speed. That is why you should definitely do something about that. So we're going to talk about that in just a second with the equipment that I've chosen. Survivability wise, this tank, it is a medium tank, but it has the armor of a heavy, at least in stature or on stats, on the paper. The angling right here is very nicely done. The tank is just very large and it's very difficult to get this vehicle hidden somewhere. And for a medium tank, it's really very big. It's almost twice as big as a T-34-85 if you put them next to one another. It really has a very big silhouette. It's difficult to hide. Mobility wise, as I already mentioned, very nice specific power to weight ratio, 16.67 horsepower per ton, 55 kilometers per hour top speed. Traverse speed is one of the biggest downsides to this vehicle, 35.21 degrees per second. That is why I went with the improved rotation mechanism, because it will allow you to turn your tank faster, also your turret, and I think that's something that this vehicle really does need. Now, if we talk about the weight as well, it weighs almost 45 tons. If you compare it to the T-34-85, that's 10 tons more. And yeah, it's a heavy tank. It's a heavy medium that can really ram something. And that's also something that you should keep in mind, that you can ram with this thing. When you're playing Tier 6, it actually is a lot of fun to go ram vehicles that are Tier 5, Tier 6, or just very lightly armored. One of the biggest downsides to this tank is it lacks concealment. It doesn't have very good camouflage values because it's very big, difficult to hide. That is why you should definitely try to improve that number, because concealment, especially starting at Tier 6, going over to Tier 7 is going to be very important. It's going to be very crucial when you're playing medium tanks. I'm going to make a whole different video in the future where I talk about the right skills for medium tank crew members, and also how to improve certain statistics and what I personally do to increase my vehicle to the max, how far I can go, and where I kind of draw the line where important things are, where things are more important to me. Now, the base view range on this vehicle is 370 meters, as you can see right there. At Tier 6, where you're playing against a lot of players that don't have a lot of equipment on their vehicle, view range is very important. This is where a lot of players don't have good view range. That is why you should definitely have decent view range, because it can increase your chances of success by a lot. Especially at Tier 6, there are a lot of players that just do not invest too much time into it. That's why you should, because you're going to have a massive advantage in comparison to a lot of other players. That's why I went with the coated optics class 2 and vents as well. You can see 433 meters base view range. In the games, it's going to be very apparent that that certainly is going to benefit you quite a lot. We're going to take a look at the field modifications real fast, and then the equipment, and afterwards we're going to jump into some gameplay, and at the end we're going to have a final verdict on if you should grind this vehicle or if you should play this tank, and if it's fun and worth it. And yeah, so right here you can see I've went with the light alloy mounting points. This is to get you better hull and gun traverse. The improved sight, which is for a smaller aim circle, so you'll have more accuracy of 0.32 instead of 0.34 or 0.33. And an anti-reflective headlights coating. Why do I have that? It gives me better concealment, but I do have a -2 deficit on the reverse speed, or yeah, I'm gonna be slower in reverse. But for me personally, it's worth it. The only issue that I have currently is because my crew is not very well skilled. I don't have any concealment, which I would highly suggest you to have, and I'm not running premium consumables. I will not have the best concealment. This is a tank that's fairly difficult to conceal because of its size. Now, moving on to the equipment, I certainly would advise to go with improved rotation mechanism or even with additional grousers. This will give you plus 20% hull traverse speed if it's in the right slot, and as well you're going to get a plus 15% maintaining top speed when moving across any terrain type. This is really, really beneficial. Both of these are good choices, but I would certainly go for that. Even turbocharger is not too bad, but the main issue for me with this tank is the traverse speed. It's very lacking, and if you have the improved rotation mechanism or even additional grousers, at least the traverse speed is going to be better. But with the improved rotation mechanism, you're also going to have better gun traverse speed on the turret. That's why I went with that. Then I went with improved ventilations and with coated optics class 2. I want to have better view range. This tank has 370 meters base view range. With this now I have 433 meters. Don't really have a lot of other skills on the commander. I do have, I think, situational awareness, so I still get a bit of a bonus or recon skill right there, as you can see. But you need to have view range when you're playing tier 6, because a lot of the tanks don't have any view range, and if you have the view range, you're going to be out spotting tanks very, very quickly, and that can add on your damage tally very, very nice as well. That's how you get the assistance damage. That's how you get your marks of excellence with the damage you deal and the damage you assisted. So really important to have optics or something to increase your view range on this vehicle, because then it becomes a very nice all-round tank. So I'd say without further ado, let's jump into some gameplay and we can talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of the vehicle in there, and we can have a final verdict afterwards. Okay, so the gameplay I've selected for you guys today is against tier 7s and tier 8 opponents. This is a place where you'll find yourself in quite a few times when you're playing a tier 6 vehicle. Unfortunately, this is the reality of World of Tanks in the year 2022, and that means that you'll have to somehow deal with the tier 8 vehicles that you have to engage and the tier 7s. Now, against these tier 6 tanks, most of the time, I think you would be quite competitive enough, but against the tier 7s and 8s, you're going to have a bit of a problem. Now, as I mentioned in the review at the beginning, this tank really has great mobility, and you can see that right here. I think your top speed is on the line about 55 kilometers per hour. Reaching the 55 kilometers top speed is a different story though. Your specific power to weight ratio is okay for a medium tank. It's a bit lackluster because of the size and the weight, but once you get up to speed, your vehicle does have quite a nice top speed of at least above 40. So right here we are playing on the map Pilsen, which is in the Czech Republic, and it's a bit of an open map. It's a bit difficult for us to really go into aggressive positions right now, because as a tier 6 in this kind of scenario, you want to be more of a supportive vehicle. This is why it's so important that you have something that can assist you, and that being view range. So currently I have 433 meters view range. So in a game like this, the best way to support your team is to spot for your team and to take the occasional pop shot when you can do damage, and maybe try to track enemy players. What you can see right there is we were able to spot the Super Hellcat, allowed our team to take him out, bounce the shot from the Leo because of the very nice angling at the front of the tank, and also because it was a really weird angle. When I was driving back, he just fired. And now we have this CS52 Liz over on the 0 line, and because he's right over there and we're in the bushes, and there's a part of his turret sticking out, we are actually able to spot him. Now obviously I'm doing something very stupid here. It's a very dangerous play. I'm just kind of taking pop shots, getting spotted every once in a while. But I have the feeling that the tank destroyers on the enemy team are either not sitting at the back or they're not focusing on me, because we have to kill the CS52 Liz. It's really important to take him out of the game so that our team on the 0 line can still kind of just survive. So that's why I'm loading a PCR shell. Unfortunately for us, just like the Leo, the guy is turning around. We hit his armor while he's turning, and thus it's basically impossible to penetrate his tank. Now, let's talk about the ammo capacity. This tank has, I think, 95 shells in its entire inventory. That's amazing. You'll never run out of shells. You'll have enough to fire for a very long time. And we do bounce once more. And that's one of the things that I mentioned prior. You have this 200mm thick gun mantlet, which is almost the entire part of the turret. Obviously, you have the cupola on top, which will be the main attraction for anyone who has played a bit of World Tanks. But still, you can see that we got very lucky. Because of the very thick gun mantlet, we were able to actually bounce a shot. So that's something that, you know, really gives you additional value to your tank. So far, we've basically only done the spotting works. 869 damage assisted, 267 damage done by ourselves. And yeah, 95 rounds that you have in your vehicle, and you can see that the APCR only, now this is only in quotation marks, or with quotation marks, 194mm of penetration. Now, obviously for a tier 6 vehicle, a tier 6 medium tank, 194mm of penetration is going to be more than enough. That is going to work out in your favor. You can see our counterpart on the enemy team was just completely wiped out because we were spotting him through the bushes. So yeah, obviously if you don't have any ability to support your team by not being able to pen the tanks, or you only have a very limited amount of HP, there's always the aspect that you can spot for them a little bit. With binos, things do work out. The only issue is your tank is not very good at spotting because the view range is lacking. At tier 8, I'm expecting most of the tanks to at least have 380, about 400 meters view range. And that means that we will be outspotted very quickly. And at the same time, our tank is not very well camouflaged, at least if you do not kind of invest time into the skills of your crew members. That is why it's important that you have a couple of skills in the camouflage department as well. Brothers in arms, all those things, they're really important to make you a competitive vehicle. So right now you can see we managed to get the complete damage assistance on the Rudy over here. He was spotted, so we got another 677 damage assisted. And now it's all about closing in, and this is where it's important that you are very conscious about your HP. You can see I have 940 HP. That allows me to just go in here and ram the E25. And because this tank weighs about 45 tons, you can definitely ram a lot of vehicles. You can ram a lot of things with this vehicle. It's already like a little bit of a tease on what you can do with the E50M, and with the right equipment and the right skills, you can basically ram a lot of vehicles. So we take out the E25. The DPM on this vehicle, as I mentioned prior, is very good. You have a very nice gun, a gun that has very good gun handling characteristics, good aim time, good accuracy. The only thing it does lack against these high tier opponents, obviously, is the penetration. 194mm of penetration is still quite low against the T28 prototype, but you're 2 tiers below him, obviously. But still, that doesn't mean that you're incapable of fighting back. Use your mobility, use your strengths to your advantage, and you can see that this tank certainly has some strengths. But it has its limitations as well. You see we took 1 or 2 hits by the E25, then we take another hit by the SU-100Y, and basically we are already toast. We have nothing remaining, and in the end we managed to finish this game off with 1,672 damage dealt and about almost 3,000 assisted. Now this is definitely going to be, this is a gameplay which shows you like the high points, the very good games where everything kind of works in your favor and nobody really shoots you. But still, being able to do that is not it's not a given, and having the ability to do that with this tank, because the tank does have quite a lot of nice features, is a very nice thing indeed. We bounced 2 shells. The armor
is not something that you have to be ashamed of as a medium tank player. It's not like it's a badge or anything like that. And I think certainly like the strengths lie in it being a secondary kind of support vehicle. So I would say without further ado, we would jump into one more gameplay, and then we're going to take a look and have a final verdict. So the second gameplay I have for you guys is when you're in a top tier situation. You're playing against only tier 6 vehicles and even some tier 5 tanks, and you're on the map Malinovka. Perfect sniping map, a map where long range engagements do work quite nicely, and where you win if you take the hill and have good scouts. So when you're playing this tank on a map like Malinovka and you're top tier, I think you can definitely go for the hill. Your armor, although it is 80 millimeters thick at the front, and the turret, which is 100 millimeters thick, in theory, which is thicker in other parts because the gun mantlet, you should be doing fine. But the issue is that a lot of these tanks, even at tier 6 and tier 5, when they load premium ammunition, they will be able to cut through your upper plate even. So the angling is going to be important, and it's a bit difficult to be out in the open with a tank that is this large. In comparison to other vehicles, we are fairly big, and we are a big target for artillery, we're a big target for tank destroyers, and anyone who just wants to take some easy pop shots. But still, I think that for a tank of this size, it does have pretty good mobility. We're currently going on up the hill with about almost 30 kilometers per hour, which obviously is not the very best top speed, but I still think that we're getting here early enough to still warrant being one of the first tanks, if it were not for the light tanks up here. Obviously these light tanks, they're going to be up here way faster than us because they just have the mobility and they have no armor at all. So in this gameplay, I really want to show off the gun's capability and what you can expect of this kind of a gun on a tier 6 German medium tank. Now, if you look at some other medium tanks at tier 6, for example, the Cromwell. The Cromwell basically lives off its mobility, and it lives off a very bad 75mm gun or 76mm gun. And you can actually see that whenever you're playing a Cromwell, you know that you'll have a very hard time going through certain tanks unless you shoot at them from the side. And this tank just has a very different playstyle, in the sense that the gun is reliable enough for you to engage even heavy tanks, and even tier 7 opponents, as long as you know where to aim. And you can see the rate of fire is really good, the accuracy is really good. This is where the tank feels at home. It doesn't feel at home though when it's getting shot, and you can see that we were hit by artillery twice. A tier 5 tank destroyer just shot at us, the toaster as I like to call it, and then 1 or 2 more vehicles opened fire. Even the tier 5, the predecessor to this tank, the VK30.02M, managed to penetrate our upper plate or the lower plate. That's just something that you have to be really aware of, that your armor, if you're somewhere out in the open, is not going to cut it. And there's still the chance that you're going to be bouncing shots from certain tanks, for example the Cromwell Berlin or even other tier 6 vehicles, but the armor is not reliable enough to give you kind of a free pass. So it's a bit of an unfortunate situation, because the gun mantlet is actually quite strong, that the hull armor doesn't really hold up, especially since the tank is this large. It's basically a Panther, and the Panther has the same hull layout. Even the Panther 2 has almost the identical hull layout. So yeah, I mean, if you're going to go down the E50 line, you're going to have the same tank for at least another tier, and then a very similar one at tier 8. And they are very big. They're big targets, and it makes it more difficult to play them effectively because everyone wants to shoot these guys. because they are not difficult to go through. That's something you have to keep in mind. That also means that whenever you're playing this vehicle, you have to be conscious of when to push and when not to push. Now with an E50 and an E50M, that's where things go really nicely, and the armor all of a sudden for a medium tank becomes very, very good, especially the upper plate becomes very strong. Now obviously you can also go the different route and forgo any kind of armor, and you go with the Leopard 1, and you'll have a great gun. You'll have really competitive stats for gun handling and mobility, but you'll lack any kind of protection. Still, I think it's a very cool choice that you have like the ability to choose between both of these tech trees, and that they are all stemming or a part of this tank. And you could see right there, very quickly we lose almost all our HP because we just made a massive mistake of going over there onto this ridgeline, getting shot by the T78 and by the AMX-12T. You can see that because this tank is this large, this tall, it's very easy to get some pop shots in, and you don't really have to be worried about anything because the German tanks are quite boxy. They're very flat on the sides. That makes it quite easy to actually do some damage. But as soon as everything changes and you have some lights and you have some support, you can really see that this tank, with its rate of fire, with the gun, even without Brothers in Arms, without any kind of modification and equipment to get you better DPM, it's really, really nice. It's very enjoyable. So right there we spot the AMX-12T. As you can see, if you're in a bush and you know a little bit on how to behave on the battlefield to get into positions where you cannot be seen, this tank certainly does have the ability to spot some vehicles, but it's not as good as a light tank, obviously, and it's not as good of a scout as some other medium tanks are because of its stature. Makes it a bit awkward, but still, nonetheless, I think in the situations where you need someone to be able to see a bit further, this tank can do it, as long as you have the right equipment, as I mentioned prior. Which is very important. The right equipment choice on this tank is very important for it to be flexible, or as flexible as can be. So yeah, now this is the situation that you want to be in when you're playing this tank. You can just shoot these guys. You don't have to worry about anything. The accuracy on the vehicle is good enough, and the rate of fire is really great. It's like it's as if you're playing an E25, but it's just a massive E25. It's very, very large because it's almost the same gun. I think it's the gun is identical, and we managed to take out these guys, get 3 kills, and managed to win this one. Now the shell velocity of 925 meters per second is not the worst, but the APCR shells, they do fly a bit faster. So I'm gonna wrap this up, and I'm gonna tell you guys what I think about the VK30.02M. I think it's a tank that in stock is not the worst tier 6 stock tank I've ever played. It actually was quite fun to play because of the decent mobility that you had. The only thing that was lacking was really the penetration on the shells, because you have a 75mm gun that is stemming from some tier 5s like the Panther 4s using it. And once you get this thing upgraded, it actually becomes more mobile, has a 75mm gun that is fairly competitive at tier 6 and still can do some work at tier 7 and 8. And if you use the right equipment and you train your crew right, you can actually make this tank work even at tier 7 and 8 when you can use some bushes and you play cautiously. Now, you only have 940 HP, which is a lot for a tier 6 medium tank. As you could see, other medium tanks don't have that kind of HP pool. But at the same time, because it's such a big tank and it's such a big target, you really need that additional HP, because every single HP does save you from getting knocked out early. You could see 6 HP was missing, and I wouldn't have gotten more damage in the end, but because I had the 6 HP, that means that I still was able to do at least 1,500 combined. So generally speaking, I think if you're interested in German medium tanks, you'll have to go for this tank either way. And I think it's a fun tank. It's a tank that I did enjoy. I did sell it though because I went prior to the Panther and I enjoyed the Panther even more. Even though the Panther had like a very specific playstyle, a very funny playstyle of being a sniper. That also kind of applies to this vehicle. It's just a little Panther at tier 6. Basically, that's what this vehicle is. Now, the question is, which line do you go to? Where do you continue? Do you go to the E50M or do you go to the Leopard 1? That will always depend on what kind of playstyle you're looking for. Are you looking for fast and fast and heavy hitting that is all up in your face, brawling? Then you'll have to go to the E50M, but you can only expect that of the E50 and the E50M, and maybe the Panther 2. But other than that, the Panther and even the Panther 2 a little bit, they don't have enough armor to be all in your face. And if you want to be the sneaky, the fast, the sniping, counter-attacking, flanking medium tanks, you'll certainly have to go for the Leopard 1 because the Leopard Prototype A and the Leopard 1 both excel at being great snipers and flanking enemies, have great view range as well, and I really enjoy both of them. So, I hope you guys did enjoy this review. As always, if you did, comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, have a good one. We're going to go through this entire line. I'm going to be reviewing the next VK soon. Then we're going to move on to the Indian, then the Leopard Prototype A, and obviously in the end, the Leopard 1. So until then, have a good one, and enjoy your week.